The A320 fuel system is very much like a conventional jet aircraft fuel system. It has fuel tanks located in the center fuselage area and the wings. The center tank is located in the fuselage. The inner tanks are located in the wings. And the outer tanks are located in the wings. Two fuel pumps are installed in the center tank, and two fuel pumps are installed in each inner tank. Two transfer valves allow fuel to transfer from the outer tanks to the inner tanks. Each inner tank feeds its respective engine. Two engine low-pressure valves are installed to cut off fuel to the engines. The center tank also feeds the engines. A cross-feed valve is fitted to connect or isolate the left and right sides. The fuel system also feeds the APU. A low-pressure valve is fitted to cut off fuel to the APU. This represents the basic fuel system. We will now see how this information is presented to the pilots in the cockpit. You can see that all the components we have talked about are displayed on the ECAM page. Let's briefly review the basic system using the ECAM fuel page. The center tank in the fuselage, the inner tanks in the wings, the outer tanks in the wings, the fuel pumps, the transfer valves, the engine LP valves, the crossfeed valve, the APU LP valve. These indications are outer tank fuel quantity, inner tank fuel quantity, center tank fuel quantity, fuel on board, FOB, fuel used quantity, outer tank temperature, inner tank temperature, the fuel panel is located on the overhead panel. Each wing tank pump is controlled by its associated push-button switch on the fuel panel. Each center tank pump is controlled by its respective push-button switch. The Mode Select push-button switch enables the pilot to run the two center tank pumps in automatic or manual mode. The cross-feed push-button switch enables the pilot to connect or isolate the left and right sides of the fuel system. We will now discuss items related to the fuel system that you will encounter during cockpit preparation. With the pumps in the off position, observe the symbology on the ECAM. The pumps are cross-line amber. The fuel pumps are switched on during initial cockpit preparation, lights out philosophy. Switch on the number 1 pump in the left tank and observe the ECAM indications. On the ECAM fuel page, the number 1 pump in the left tank illuminates inline green, indicating that the pump is running. Continue by switching on the number 2 pump in the left tank. The left tank pump 2 is now also running. Click on the forward arrow to finish switching the center and right tank pumps on. All the pumps are now running. Now you notice a new message on the checklist portion of the engine warning display. The message "Refueling" is displayed on the engine warning display, indicating that the refuel control panel door is open. Once refueling is complete, you will verify the fuel distribution in the tanks. It's now time to start the APU. Before starting, notice that the APU low-pressure valve is closed, cross-line green, and the fuel line downstream from the low-pressure valve is amber, indicating the APU is not running. The APU is now running. On the ECAM fuel page, you can see the APU low-pressure valve has opened, inline green, and the fuel line downstream is green. During engine start, the ECAM engine page is automatically displayed. However, to illustrate what occurs in the fuel system, the ECAM fuel page has been selected. Before we start the engine, observe the following. The engine low-pressure valves are cross-line amber to indicate closure. The fuel used quantities remain from the previous flight. Engine identification numbers are amber. This is because the engines are not running. On the engine warning display, the fuel flow, FF, indicates amber crosses. Engine 2 is starting. Observe, the low-pressure valve is inline green. Fuel used indication automatically resets to 0. On the engine warning display, fuel flow starts. Engine identification number 2 changes to white. Engine 1 is starting. Observe, the LP valve is inline green. Fuel used indication automatically resets to 0. On the EWD, fuel flow starts. Engine identification number 1 changes to white. Notice that the gross weight, GW, has now appeared. This indication becomes available after engine start. Observe the message, Center Tank Feeding, in the memo area of the EWD. A 2-minute timer is activated after engine start and is restarted after the second engine is running. The center tank pumps will operate for this time and will automatically shut down after 2 minutes if slats are extended. If slats are not extended, the center tank pumps will run indefinitely, provided there is fuel in the center tanks. The items related to the engine start are complete. We will now discuss items related to the fuel system that you will encounter during taxi. When the slats are extended, one of the automatic functions of the center tank is activated. Notice that the Mode Select push-button switch is set to Auto, lights out. Observe, the flaps are extending. 2 minutes after the second engine start, the message, Center Tank Feeding, disappears. On the ECAM fuel page, the center tank pumps are cross-line green, indicating that they have stopped running automatically. The main wing tank pumps now feed the engines for takeoff. The items related to taxi are complete. We will now discuss items related to the fuel system that you will encounter during normal climb, cruise, and descent. When the slats are retracted, the message Center Tank Feeding reappears. This indicates at slats retraction, the center tank pumps are again feeding the engines. This is an automatic function of the center tank pumps when the Mode Select push button is in auto. Observe the corresponding pump indications on the ECAM, inline green. You are now in cruise. Notice the center tank feeding message has again disappeared, indicating that the center tank pumps have automatically shut off. However, the center tank is not empty, and an auto function has again occurred. To explain why, we must look at fuel recirculation. Some fuel to the engines is diverted to cool the integrated drive generators, IDGs, then returns to the wing tanks. If the engines are fed from the center tank and the wing tanks are full, the center tank pumps automatically shut off. The inner tank pumps take over and feed the engines so that there is room for fuel from the IDGs. After the inner tank pumps have fed approximately 1,100 pounds of fuel, the center tank pumps automatically restart. The following illustration regarding the opening of the transfer valves is incorrect. The valves do not open until a low-level sensor detects 1,650 pounds of fuel remaining in that tank. The sequence is shown only because it does show the automatic operation of the transfer valves. You are in descent. To better illustrate the remaining indications, we will keep the ECAM fuel page displayed. The center tank pumps have automatically shut off, cross-line green, because the center tank is empty. The inner tanks are now again feeding the engines. Let's see what happens when the inner tanks reach a low level. When either inner tank reaches a low-level limit, both transfer valves open automatically, transferring fuel from the outer to the inner tanks. After at least one transfer valve is open, the message "Outer tank fuel transferred" is displayed on the engine warning display. The fuel is now totally transferred and the outer tanks are empty. Observe the transfer valves remain open. They will be automatically closed during the next refueling operation. This is a demonstration of a failure of the center tank pumps. You are in cruise with the aircraft operating normally. On the engine warning display, read the title of the failure. Notice that the ECAM fuel page is automatically displayed. Notice the corresponding indications. On the ECAM page, low, boxed amber, means the pump is on but not producing adequate pressure. And on the fuel control panel, the fault light is illuminated amber on the center tank pump 1 push-button switch. Perform ECAM action. Switch on the fuel cross-feed. Observe that the on light illuminates white on the cross-feed push-button switch to indicate that the valve starts to open. The cross-feed valve is shown amber during the valve transit. The open light illuminates green when the valve is fully open. On the ECAM page, the cross-feed valve is inline green. This allows both engines to be fed from the center tank using center tank pump 2. Be aware that if you do not open the cross-feed valve, engine 1 will use fuel from the left inner tank and an imbalance will occur. Continue ECAM action. On the center tank pump 1 push-button switch, the amber fault light disappears and is replaced by the white off light, indicating that the pump has been turned off. On the ECAM fuel page, the low indication disappears and is replaced by an amber cross line, meaning that center tank pump 1 has been manually switched off. The abnormal procedure is complete. The fuel system is analyzed. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear fuel. The center tank feeding memo indicates that the center tank is feeding the aircraft, and the fuel cross-feed memo indicates that the cross-feed valve is open. On the status page, center tank pump 1 appears amber in the inoperative system column. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear status. ECAM complete. Screens normal. You are continuing in cruise. Remember that center tank pump 1 has failed. Let's see what happens if center tank pump 2 also fails. On the engine warning display, the amber message, center tank pumps low pressure, means that both center tank pumps have failed. You have the same indications as you had for center tank pump 1 failure. Low boxed amber on the ECAM page, and the amber fault light on the fuel control panel. Perform ECAM action. Observe the following indications. On the fuel panel, both center tank pumps are off. On the engine warning display, the FOB has a half amber box. The amber box means that some of the indicated total fuel on board is not usable, in this case, center tank fuel. On the ECAM fuel page, the fuel on board value is boxed amber, meaning that not all fuel on board is usable. The center tank pumps are crossline amber, meaning that they have been manually shut off. The center tank quantity is boxed amber, meaning that the center tank fuel is not usable. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear fuel. The status page indicates the following. A green message indicates that the center tank fuel is unusable. The center tank pumps are inoperative. This is indicated in amber. After review and confirmation from the pilot flying, clear status. ECAM complete. Screens normal. The moral. Losing one center tank pump requires opening the cross-feed valve to prevent a fuel imbalance. Losing both center tank pumps means center tank fuel is unusable. You are still in cruise. All systems are restored and operating normally. We are now going to study the failure of the inner tank pumps. The amber message, left tank pump 1 low pressure on the EWD, means that the left tank pump 1 has failed. The ECAM fuel page appears automatically with the corresponding pump indication. Note, the master caution and the single chime are not triggered since the fuel tank has another pump for redundancy. Perform ECAM action. Observe, on the fuel panel, the amber fault light in the left tank pump 1 push-button switch is replaced by the white off light. On the ECAM page, the amber low indication is replaced by an amber cross line, indicating that the pump is off. After review and confirmation, clear fuel. The inoperative system is left tank pump 1, indicated in amber. After review and confirmation, clear status. ECAM complete. Screens normal. We are continuing in cruise. Remember that left tank pump 1 has failed. Let's see what happens if left tank pump 2 fails. The amber message, Fuel Left Tank Pump 1 and 2 Low Pressure on the EWD means that both left tank pumps have failed. Note, at this time, the center tank pumps are still feeding the engines. When fuel from the left tank is required, refer to the flight manual for fuel gravity feeding. The ECAM procedure requires you to operate the center tank pumps in manual mode. This is to prevent the center tank pumps from being shut off automatically, for example during slats extension. Perform ECAM action. Pressing the Mode Select switch illuminates the white manual light. The center tank pumps are now operated manually. Continue ECAM action. The left tank pump 2 indications are the same as for the left tank pump 1 shown previously. After review and confirmation, clear fuel. Both left tank pumps are inoperative. This is indicated in amber. After review and confirmation, clear status. ECAM complete, screens normal. We learned from the ECAM actions and indications associated with the left tank pump failures that losing one inner tank pump is not so critical, no master caution, because of redundancy, 2 pumps. Losing both inner tank pumps means using gravity fuel feeding if necessary. Refer to the flight manual. Now let's see some other abnormal indications that you can have on the ECAM fuel page. If on the engine warning display, the FOB fuel on board indication is displayed with 2 dashes across the 2 last digits, the fuel quantity indicator, FQI, is in degraded mode. Select the ECAM fuel page on the ECP to determine which tank is affected. You can see that the affected tank is the left outer tank. The 2 amber dashes indicate a loss of accuracy of the indicated fuel quantity. Also, notice that the fuel temperature can appear amber associated with an ECAM message and a single chime if a high or low limit is detected. In our case, the outer tank temperature has exceeded the low limit. On the ECAM fuel page, the left transfer valve is displayed in amber, meaning that it is closed when it should have automatically opened. The fuel in the left outer tank is no longer usable.